Right now, we have a new speaker, Michele De Simoni, senior machine learning engineer for medical data. In particular, today is going to talk about an introduction to AI safety, particular fields addressing the risk of AI. So please welcome Michele, and the stage is yours.
Thank you. OK, let me know if the mic seems to work. Perfect. OK. Hi, everyone. I'm Michele De Simoni. I currently live in Italy, in Bologna, to be more precise. I work remotely as a senior machine learning scientist at Align Technology, where I do work on applying ML to the fields of healthcare, especially dental healthcare. There's nothing to do, like you will see that I work at Align Tech, nothing to do with actual AI alignment, which is something that we will discuss today, unfortunately. I also handle a lot of data engineering. I once was an AGI skeptic, both in terms of capability. So I thought it was something that would, come in the far future, or maybe not possible at all. And I was also very skeptic about the risks. I've sort of changed my mind, otherwise I won't be here giving this talk. Probably the most important thing which made me change my mind is Human Compatible book from Stuart Russell. I highly recommend that if you need to start somewhere, this is a very good point to start. All the slides will be made available after the presentation, and you will see there's plenty of links in the slides, because the idea is that if you find this interesting and you want to know more, you can just open the slides and click on the links, and they will take you some places. One thing of note, some people may kind of get some panic response or something like that when discussing existential risk, catastrophe risk, or everyone dying, basically. But I think that one of the core assumptions that we will see is that probably there's no need for panic, at least not much, because probably both the very pessimistic and very optimistic view are sort of I think, misguided at the moment. There's very high uncertainty. I can be found online if you search for Michele De Simoni, or if you search for Michele Ubik De Simoni, or if you search for Mr. Ubik. You can find me on Reddit, Twitter, LinkedIn, whatever, and GitHub as well. So I actually like to front load the basically the message from the end, so that probably if we don't have time or if the attention drops, doesn't matter, so you already know which actually are the objective of the talk. So the idea is that maybe there's this thing which is called AI, you may have heard of it, and probably it's not just that we have, sorry, just let me close it. Okay, sorry, colleagues are writing. Jesus. Let me switch to the, OK, let's do it like this. So I don't get interrupted anymore. OK, you may have heard of AGI. The AGI, we will give a working definition of AGI, but in general, we can see that basically anything that a human can do. So we don't talk about raw intelligence, we talk about capabilities. So if a human can do it, then AGI, or whatever the thing will be, will probably do it. The problem is that this technology seems to be kind of right around the corner. We thought it was maybe quite far away. Doesn't seem to be. It seems to be that the actual pace of development is picking up, actually. It's accelerating. So maybe it's not something that will come in, I don't know, maybe 50 years, 60 years. Will probably be likely in 10, how things are looking. However, I think that the very most important message is that we live in a very high uncertainty with regard to risk, possibility, current technology, solution. Everything is kind of very much uncertain. We also, of course, there are current risk and future risk. While the presentation will slightly focus more on the more existential and future risk, there are, of course, real danger, and they will receive a brief discussion even today. And there is an overlap between them, which is something where, if you're more concerned about current issue, you can already start working on some of these, because they also have an impact in the long term. And the whole field, the AI safety and AI element, is very much pre-pragmatic. So if you look into it, it feels like deep learning at the beginning. So imagine when GANs first came out around 2014, 2016, where you start to have some form of formalization, some form of oh, this is how we train the model. This is best practice and libraries and whatever. But currently, we are still in this very much exploratory phase. And there's not many people doing it. Usually the comparison is probably the capabilities versus safety. Personnel is usually a factor of more than 100 or something like that. So it's kind of crazy how few people are actually doing existential safety or AI safety in general. and even ethics doesn't get lots of traction with respect to capability. So like you can actually easily master one of these fields in probably like less than a year time, and then contribute to like top-of-the-line research, which is something which in most other machine learning, I think, fields is not possible at the moment, because like they've already been sort of like mined for all their values, and there's lots of people pushing like capabilities. It's very hard to push capabilities, but some of this stuff can also be done in academics or with not so many resources. So it's very interesting on that point. And also in the end, you should probably simply try to get informed, because this stuff is probably like, if everything goes well, it will be revolutionary at minimum. And it's not every day that you get to live through something which is basically like either fire or the invention of writing or something like that. So yeah, maybe just like even for stuff like governance, so if you're not into technical alignment, there's still stuff to do, even outage. So this is my main takeaway. So very high uncertainty. We really don't know what we're going to face in terms of risk. We don't know how we're going to fix it. We have some idea in terms of risk, solution, and whatever, but the future is very uncertain. And probably we should be very cautious, because this stuff is powerful. So where to start? I will give, like, this is basically a dump list of my favorite researcher and media and podcasts and courses. So if you want to start from somewhere, I highly recommend this one. Start from this slide. If you already know something about deep learning, I think one of the best introduction to the problem, and I will be mentioning it quite a lot, is the alignment problem from a deep learning perspective from Richard Ngo. I hope I didn't butcher his name, which is actually, I think, one of the most important alignment researcher currently at OpenAI. I think Jan Leike should be the current head, but he's a very big shot as well. But as you can see, there are many people. You can find most of them on Twitter. Actually, Twitter is a very good place to follow this discussion, although, that's what it is. But also, otherwise, I highly recommend also the Alignment Forum, which is an amazing resources, and the AXRP podcast, which is a gem, because like it's a very small podcast. You can find it on YouTube, where the host is able to interview actually like amazing, like top-of-the-line research is incredible. So highly recommend, very high production values. And then you have a list of companies and people who are doing this type of problem. So there are basically three questions I want to ask. The point of all this is, what if we actually succeed? Like, imagine that in 10 years, we succeed at creating AGI. We thought it was very far in the future. Actually, the current Metaculus latest, for whatever it's worth, prediction market posit around, I think, 2032. So basically, it was like 9 years from now. So it's probably even less than 10 years. But then we also have the question, what if we fail? What does failure look like? Apparently, failure is kind of bad. In the words of Sam Altman, worst case scenario of AGI is lights out for all of us. And that's probably correct. Like, the worst case scenario is probably like extinction or something very close to extinction. And it's not even the worst scenario. There are even worse scenario than extinction, but I won't be covering them because I don't think they are likely. But as also Yosha Benjo, one of the father of AI, has written like literally 3 days ago. We have been rushing towards something because we thought the goal was very far away, but actually the goal is probably not so far away, and we have no idea of how to handle this type of technology. And also there has been recently a call from the United Nations to set up a multidisciplinary and like cross-country task force to this stuff. The call is actually open. If you go into the UN and you have experience in this field, you can apply. There's a similar call also for the UK. And one sentence of one of the core risks is like it's given in a very excellent way from Ilya Sutskever, which is one sentence articulation of why alignment may not be straightforward is like human hide their intent, we can lie, and why shouldn't the AGI be able to do that? And it may be actually quite hard to detect, we don't know. So given this, we'll start from the overview of the risk, like what are the four main types of risk when we talk about AGI and why we want safety. The first one is malicious use. Imagine that we are basically giving people access to the equivalent of pocket nukes. We're talking about AGI, so like 10 years from now, where you can spin up your own copy of like a perfect scientist or whatever. There's actually lots of risk in terms of censorship, surveillance, discrimination, like biosecurity, propaganda, whatever. We also have AI race, which is very problematic because imagine now that already now AI is like very important in military. There are companies like Palantir, where like trying to put your ChatGPT into like killer drones which is probably something we should not do. Like, don't do autonomous weapon. Like, literally, like if you have learned anything from sci-fi is that we shouldn't attach this stuff to the internet, and we have done it. We shouldn't let them stuff like print molecules or whatever, and they can do it because they are like basically biolab, which works like as a cloud provider, and we shouldn't attach this stuff to like autonomous weapon. We are actually doing the autonomous weapon, and they have been called to attach this AI to nuclear response system, which is like the last thing you want to do. And so it's like, yeah, maybe we should not race to integrate AI into everything because we don't know how to handle it. There's also organizational risk, like maybe organizations screw up. Like Meta, they published Llama in, I think, 3 days. Llama was leaked. Imagine that now Llama, of course, is like a harmless model, but imagine that like Llama, I don't know, like Llama 10, and is actually like able to actually do harm if released in terms of propaganda or biosecurity or whatever. That would be like kind of catastrophic, because how do you put back the genie once it's out in the open source world? And then of course you have rogue AIs, because we don't necessarily know whether agent will like, you know, take off and do their own like Terminator kind of scenario. So yeah, we basically like, there's just a few risks, you know, very small stuff. We do have a working definition of AGI. I think that when people call about artificial intelligence, I think intelligence is such a broad word, doesn't mean anything. There are people calling like, oh, the Chinese room experiment, or like, oh, you have to be a cognitive scientist to understand whether something is actually, you know, intelligent or not. I don't think we actually care about this in safety, because the only thing that matters is not whether the AI is actually intelligent, conscious, or whatever. Strictly in terms of safety, is about like, can this stuff do harm to you if it's misused or mishandled? If the answer is yes, I don't care if it's intelligent. Like you don't need to know whether fire is intelligent or not to know that it can burn you. You only need to know that actually fire can burn you, and that's the only thing you want to know in terms of safety. Like how does it work? Why does it burn? How the fire spread? That's what we are going to do. So I won't be defining when I say AGI, I mean like something which is very, very human capable. Here we have two different definitions, which are actually similar in scope. So one is basically, my favorite is the PASTA definition, which is an AI system that can essentially automate all of the human activities, need to speed up scientific and technological advancement. Because if you can do this, you do everything else. You can do weapon design, you can do cure cancer, you can colonize the star, whatever. So like the idea is that we expect that this stuff will be here soon. Because for instance, one of the goals of the OpenAI is build an automated AI alignment research. And if you can automate alignment research, you can automate all the other type of research as well. So there's like particular stuff of research you can't automate. Alignment as well has been sort of bloated in terms of definition. I think there are three components of a three-dimensional alignment, which is one which is very technical. We want the ally to do what we want. That there is the intent, which is actually what we must focus on, which is we want to at least try what we want to do. They may fail, they may actually produce some actually even like very dangerous results, but at least they're trying, okay? And then there's of course the alignment as AI existential safety. So like, how do we not kill you know, the whole of humanity with this technology? Well, that is a very social technical problem, because it's not just a technical solution. You have governance, you have ethics, you have outreach, you have policies, you have a lot of stuff. How do we get there? Like, how do we get from where we are now, where we are like in this, oh, we know there are some risks. The people have said, oh, there's a catastrophic risk of AI. They have signed the extinction like phrase. I don't know if it's the sentence extinction. So my current belief at this very moment is that like I have a very wide uncertainty bar. And I think there's a list of potential solutions, which are technical and some related to governance, which are worth exploring and worth talking about. But like, these are my favorite, because again, like there's many stuff which is currently being tried on, and we don't know exactly what will work. We have scalable oversight, which is finding a way to leverage more powerful model to produce better reward signals. So basically, like you will use like intermediate model to manage like model more like complex than what you're working on. So basically, it's trying to use like GPT n -1 to like maybe a collection of GPT n -1 to try and manage a GPT n instance. Or like the idea is that basically we cannot supervise the output of very human-like or superhuman-like AGI, so we need a way to enhance our capability of supervising this stuff. There's a whole field of research. There are many approaches. There's debate. There's iterated debate amplification, distillation amplification. There's lots of approaches. Again, if you look up at these this post from Richard and Joe, AGI safety career, it goes much more into deeper with each one of these one, because I can't cover them all in 30 minutes. Then there's mechanistic interpretability, which is one of my favorites, which is like basically neuroscience for actual machine. So it's like, oh, well, like how do actually the circuit inside the models, they're called circuit, like they're like basically computational graphs. How do they work? Why do they work? How does GPT-4 learns like the words representation, the relationship between tokens? Why sometimes there may be like, I don't know, like the French neuron, the Canadian neuron that fires when you present it with the hockey and maybe maple syrup or something like that. Like, how does the model actually, like its cognition work under the hood? Like, as if we basically, one of the ideas is that we want to create an MRI machine to detect like psychopathy in the models. Because that will be very useful. Because if we had something like that, if we had like a perfect polygraph or a perfect MRI machine, we could like simply look at the black box that we are building and say, actually this one wants to kill us all, or maybe it doesn't. So like, okay, it's okay. We can like release it into the wild. The idea is like mechanistic interpretability is like the idea of opening up the black box and actually see what's going on inside. It's very hard. The best place to start is from Neil Nanda. He's amazing. He worked at Anthropic. He now works at DeepMind. He's one of my favorite researchers of all time. He's great. He's amazing in podcasts. So, like, reach out, look at his post, look at his guide. He has like one of the best introduction overall. And also, this field is very interesting for people who maybe don't have access to like giant cluster of GPUs or TPUs, because this is very doable also like on normal hardware or even on academic hardware. Sorry, we have. Sorry, this one has doubled. Then there's like a whole list of extra stuff, which I am just covering briefly, which is like, for instance, evaluations. Evaluation is very nice. We need to evaluate this kind of model, because maybe you're training GPT-4 and you don't know if you can release it to the wild. Evaluation gives you that information. Arc is working on this one. They have done amazing work. They've done the evaluation for GPT-4, but much more work is still needed. There's a very beautiful paper from DeepMind, and basically DeepMind, OpenAI, and almost all the company, they went together and they published like the first framework of like, this is the stuff like in terms of dangerous capability that we should try and see whether the model has. For instance, like the ability of self-exfiltrating from a system and self-replicating the wild, because you don't want an AI that is able to do this. You don't want your AI to be able to self-replicate in the net. That's really like the recipe for disaster. We have, of course, like unrestricted adversarial training. We want to do the adversarial training stuff. We want to know their failure mode, because maybe like the AI is perfectly fine, but then it encounters like a set of words which make it go berserker. We want to know that. Then the threat modeling, like, what are the catastrophic risks we are facing, and how do we mitigate them? There's governance and policy. For instance, like how do we manage GPUs? There's field building. Like there's very few people doing this, so it's very good to go out there and tutor people, or like learn about this stuff. There's outreach. Like you probably even like the non-techie citizens should know that this stuff is going on, because it's quite big. There's also cyborgism, which is one of my favorites. Which is the idea that probably we should not like outsource our agency to the machine. We should probably try and retain as much agency as we can within the human part, and then try to use the machine for like enhancing the human capability. So like not substituting human, but like enhancing human. Then there's formal alignment, which is something which was done by Miri, and it's more like sort of like mathy, very formal. I am not really a huge fan of this, but again, like you don't know where the good idea will come out, and like if one of the people working on formal alignment actually is able to crack it, then we are good. Like this is probably like the biggest step forward you can do, but it's also the one which, as in my opinion, the lowest like possibility of. Of actually working in time. Then there are some. Does it work now? Yeah. Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, then there's the whole like safety versus short-term versus long-term risk. I think that they're actually not two different fields. They have huge overlap. So even if you are more of a long-termist or an effective altruist and you want to maximize your like maximum number of possible people in 3 trillion years, which is something I may not necessarily agree upon as a good ethics But you can do even like, there are stuff that are of concern today, for instance, like interpretability and algorithmic bias. There's transparency of data set, there's like mass surveillance and discrimination, which probably they are very bad, because if you start to do it already with something which is not AGI, imagine when we are going to do AGI. This stuff will be like cranked up to 100. Of course, like autonomous weapon, like don't do autonomous weapon. I think I've mentioned quite a while. I will probably mention it by the end of the stuff. Also, watermarking is very useful because you want to know whether you're looking at something which is done by AI. There's also, what about governance? Like we talked about all technical stuff. Actually, governance is a very, very complex field because there's something called politics, and especially international politics, which can be quite hard to work with. But like some questions which are kind of open is like, should companies that make like this model be responsible for misuse? Maybe. How do we draft regulation that is capable to keep up with the change? We don't know. Should hardware be regulated? Because like one easy way would be to actually monitor all the sales of the GPUs, because there's basically almost like 3 companies can control all the supply of GPUs and the stuff that is needed to do the GPUs in the whole world. So it's like if you actually make a monopoly or you really tighten regulation on those ones, you really can control the computational power. If you can control the computational power, you have secured like the substrate on which the AI runs. So it's like a very good way to actually implement governance. How do we combat surveillance, misinformation, profiling? We don't want this type of stuff. They're not good. Like, it doesn't look good in China. How do we handle mass unemployment? Because AGI will create mass unemployment. Because yes, while we are approaching AGI, there will probably be unemployment, and maybe some new work will pop up. But be sure that once you have something which can replace a human, like one-to-one, in terms of capabilities, you no longer need a human to work. And so, like, there will be mass unemployment. And so, like, do we do UBI? Do we do, like, massive welfare state? How do we handle the windfall of, like, having this model automating sort of, like, the whole all economies? How AI should be deployed in the military? Should we deploy AI in the military? We will deploy AI in the military, of course, because they will be doing it. But, like, how do we want to do it? Should human be kept in the loop when the AI makes decision? And especially, like, how should we conduct red team exercise? Like, who should validate red team exercise? Should we put license on very major, like, model random? I'm not talking about your, like, fine-tuning Llama. I'm talking about, like, building GPT-N. Like, that should probably be something that maybe there should be some formal oversight, and maybe a committee should, like, go and see, like, oh, you know, maybe, like, the cybersecurity of your company is actually pretty tight, so you can handle the model's weight. Otherwise, maybe, like, you risk of leaking model weights to non-state actor or other state actors which may not be so friendly or may not be so scrupulous. So it's very important. What about open source? I mean, like, yes, open source is very nice. It pushes, it helps with research. It helps a lot with, even with alignment research. But you have the problem that you are actually, like, this is technology, both dual use in terms that it has civilian and military application, and it's also general purpose. And it's very hard to, it's very easy to disseminate and replicate. And once it is out, you cannot put it back in. We have seen what happened with Llama and its weight. You can, like, put the genie back in. Like, once it's out, it's out. And so it's like, we should probably have a conversation like, what should be open source? How should the researcher access this model? Maybe not everything should be open source. Maybe not everything actually should be under the public scrutiny of the peer review process and open in the light, because that may be problematic. Like, if you're trying to, like, you have the design of the pocket nuke and you can build a pocket nuke with, like, everything that is on this table, then maybe you don't want that type of information out in the public. Maybe not yet, not until you know how to, like, handle the pocket nuke safely. And that is very problematic in terms of, it's basically a dilemma, because we want to have open source to boost science, but you also do not want them to security reasons. And now I'll give you actually the words. No, please, Stefania. Come in and give.
Okay,
like,
no, well, in 30 seconds, there is a new European networks for AI safety. This is a great website where you can find local groups in your own city. You can start one, and we can go direct in the next slide. The best value is that there is a database of researchers working on the topic. You can add yourself in your work in something similar, or use it to collaborate with other people in there.
Especially because you can find their interests, which is very nice.
Yes, it's very well. You can subscribe to the newsletter, and there is activity going on in Serbia, Netherlands, France, and feel free to reach out. I'll give you the last 30 seconds to the conclusion.
So, we are done. So I hope I didn't scare you about the risk. I hope that you have an idea that there are risks, but there are also solutions. These are possible. I think that the solution will likely be a mix of all this stuff. I don't think that singularly we'll probably not crack the problem with just mechanistic interpretability or scalable oversight. We probably need like a whole bunch of stuff to work together, and it will probably be like duct tape and zip ties and spit and glue, holding everything together. And maybe that will work. And let's hope that it works. But yeah, let's hope. Because that's currently the future is very uncertain, so please like go home, don't necessarily panic, don't become a doomer. I've been there, I've been a doomer, I'm not now a doomer anymore. I still think that the risks are quite high enough that we should really have this conversation. Because even if it's like 1% of everyone dying is actually a lot. Because 1% of like the world ending it's kind of relevant. And if you believe that it's at least 5 times more, 20 times more, then it becomes really relevant. You don't need to have like 99% doom like probability to, to be working on this. And also you don't need to be an effective altruist to work on this, because like this stuff will come in 10 years. So unless you don't expect to be alive in 10 years, maybe you don't want to die. I assume that none of us like really has like this huge desire for death, at least not in 10 years. And maybe you actually want to live in the, post-scarcity utopia where like the machines do everything and we live like kings and whatever. Maybe this is like probably the single, if not the single most important thing to be working on, at least to be aware of at the moment, because we can make the difference even like as a citizen in terms of governance. So once again, thank you for the talk. I hope it didn't scare anyone. You can reach me by looking up Michele this morning, Mr. Ubik, or whatever. So thank you. And in the words of the Hitchhiker Guide to the Galaxy, don't panic. Thank you. We should have time for questions?
Yes, okay. Thank you, Michele. There was a lot of information.
Yes.
We have a few questions.
And it's also very much incomplete, as the title says. Like, this is the tip of the iceberg. Like, if you start looking at stuff, there's quite more. Where is it? Like, there is kind of a lot. And this is probably like, I don't know, maybe like the top 10% of the best research out there, but it's the top 10%. Yes. If you like. And those are actually my favorites, so like I'm super biased, so whatever.
Thank you, Michele. Let's go with the first question. Thank you.
Thank you so much for your talk. Thank you so much for shedding light upon this topic, which is really, really important to be brought it out. As somebody that I'm not inside of AI, well, like my topic is not about that. What can I do as a citizen?
There are several groups. Which maybe I don't necessarily share too much, but there are groups that are working on outreach and this type of stuff. There have been like proposals at the EU, so you can actually contact your representative in the EU Parliament. You can bombard them with mail. You can do we can do lobbies. Not that in the US that we can do this type of stuff. We can do it actually in the EU. It's more difficult for us to coordinate, but what you can do, you can inform yourself about the risk, inform yourself about like what your country is doing, or what your, like in our case, probably Europe is doing, or what the world is doing, and you can contribute in the governance, and especially in the side of like ethics. And then I think there's also a good way to do outreach, where like you simply, it's basically like, imagine that this stuff is like global warming before global warming was even like, defined properly as modeling and science, stuff like that. Like, there are some people who are trying to say, like, yeah, there's some model of risk, and probably we should take a look at it. And we're now starting to see that the risks are actually probably present. And one very important stuff, if we learn the lesson, is that we should like share the gospel of like, there are risks, which it's not like we have to panic, it's not like we have to shut everything down necessarily, but we need to proceed with caution. So that's like, as an individual, we're not techie. There are ways to contribute. Like if you look at the Effective Altruism Forum, there are usually open positions even for like stuff as managerial roles, helping with like finances at this company which I mentioned there. There are many opportunities to do this type of volunteer work. And there's also lots of opportunity for the ML for goods, which is very important to like make a difference now, because like there are stuff that already happens today which we want to be fixing. Because if we don't fix it now, imagine later. So yes.
Thank you. No, still time for another question.
Thank you very much for the talk. We saw here today a slide with open questions, but also this slide here with people working on them. Just very shortly, there is this EU AI Act that is being drafted at the moment. How much you or people working that we saw today are part of this let's say, official acts that are happening at the moment? Are those questions asked there?
Yeah, the EU Act is, like your opinion, is sort of a very complex topic. It's almost as complex as the GDPR for people working in AI. The reception was mixed because on a side you usually have the company lobbying for like less strict regulation, or at least like usually it's not necessarily regulation, but less liability. Like it's okay for them to be regulated on like the large model and stuff like that, but they maybe do not want to have like the liability of misuse because it very actually also are. There's also a problem with data transparency because when you train on the whole internet and then I ask you to disclose what you trained on, it may be complex. It may be complex for you because then you sort of like create problem with copyright laws, stuff like that. But there are calls for experts actually in the field. Especially, I really appreciated the one from the UK government, where they're actually trying to set up this task force. The UK, I think, is a very good model of how do you integrate the actual, technical expertise into the decision making. They're doing, I think, a great job in this regard. The EU was the first one to have a draft, but I think that as many stuff with the EU, it's kind of too much, mired in bureaucracy, and maybe it doesn't address some of the actual core issues like the general purpose machine and stuff like that. So it's like, yeah, they are trying to have a call for technical people in governance. And there are courses. Some I think maybe were also sponsored by ENIS. I think ENIS has the conversation on
part.
Yeah.
A part is creating.
But there's also like this one. Where is it? I don't know if you can see if you go to AI Safety Fundamentals, which is a website which has 3 different courses, 2 on technical alignment, and 1 very good course is on governance, which both me and Stefania were also taking as well. We were following that because it was very interesting, and they also have refreshed it now, I think. They've just updated it to like with stuff, very recent stuff, and it's super good. If you want to see like, oh, what's going on into governance, how can I contribute technically into governance, that's actually a very important discussion. Also, if you have knowledge of like actual electronic hardware, like how the GPUs are done, like not machine learning kind of tech, but like proper like more like on the supply chain kind of stuff, or like actual hardware technology, it's very important for governance, this type of stuff, because again, handling the GPUs is crucial. Yeah. So that's how you
have to
contribute.
Stop you, Michele, even if I'm in love with the subject as well. Thank you all. Michele will be here, me as well.
Yes.
And thank you again, Michele.
Thank you, everyone.